Here we go.
Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Good day. I'm CARLO Parcelli. I'm your host for today for the Foreign Policy Review for May 25th, 2023. I'm joined by my two co-hosts from the left coast of the United States. We have Billy Bob, and from Hungary we have Ben Toth. And our special guest today from Yalta in Crimea is Regis Tremblay, a filmmaker and longtime activist. And the first question we're going to ask today, now that Bakhmut has fallen, what next? What can we look to the future for in this conflict and the whole thing, the world economic situation, and everything else that's tied into this enormous collapse of this important stronghold for the Ukrainians in Ukraine. I'm going to just toss it over to Regis. What do you think, Regis?
Well, it's huge, really. The Russian version is Artyomovsk. They keep printing Bakhmut almost everywhere in the West. That's not the name anymore, however. It was actually not only historic, but is very consequential, I believe, because Zelensky has stated repeatedly he will not let them surrender, that this battle that's been going on for some over 200 days, 220 some days now, supposedly the largest battle in Europe since World War II. It's catastrophic, I think, for Zelensky. I think it's equally really disappointing for the United States and NATO, because this is a defeat of the United States and NATO, with Ukraine just, serving as the tennis court on which this war is being fought. So this battle was really enormous and consequential, as I said. Evgeny Prigozhin, the billionaire owner of the Wagner Group, sometimes referred to as the choir or the orchestra, he revealed this week that his forces lost 20,000 servicemen during this fight. And he also said that Kiev had suffered as many as 50,000 casualties, deaths. And I read somewhere where there were maybe as many wounded. So it was an expensive battle in terms of human loss for both sides. Now, I have really hesitated speculating on when this conflict might end. And I'm not going to do it now, but I will say that this defeat of Bakhmut, or now Russian Artyomovsk, has opened the door and the way for Russia now to begin making significant gains on the ground. I think what's also important to mention is that just in the last 4 or 5 days surrounding this battle, the fall of Bakhmut, the Russian Air Force, the Russian Navy, and ground forces have increased their shelling, intensive shelling, massive shellings in all of the oblasts in Ukraine, but especially in Kiev Odessa, Zaporozhye, and Kharkov. So what does this portray? What I don't know, but I think that it is significant that Russia is doing everything it can to make sure there is no counter operation, counteroffensive by Ukraine. I personally do not believe they are capable of doing that, even with the thousands of mercenaries, supposedly some 20,000 Polish soldiers, and God knows how many others from the United States, from UK, from Canada, from Germany, uniformed servicemen that are involved in this conflict. So that's my take on the significance of this. I have a friend who said that with the fall of Bakhmut or Artyomovsk, that the war will be over by the end of the summer and early fall. Not my prediction, but it certainly looks like if Russia wanted to, they certainly could do that.
Yes, and the voices in the West are increasingly skeptical of Kiev. And there have been, other things. I mean, to add context, this was May 22, the liberation of Artyomovsk, now to be known as forever. 1 year after the liberation of Mariupol to the day, and 4 years after the inauguration of Zelensky, the clown in Kiev. So a very significant date. And done by, if you read the Western press, by Yevgeny Prigozhin, which is Eugene, the restaurateur is how they call him, or the chef of Putin, that's the Western press, and his convicts with shovels, because Russia has run out of missiles a year ago, and yet there's missile strikes every day for a week now, which is, I think, incredibly significant. So it feels like 1944 to me from the outside, looking in. But what we got even more recently is 2 days ago, this incursion into Russian territory, into the Belgorod territory of about 100 people who said they were the Freedom of Russia or the Battalion of Free Russians, basically neo-Nazis, but not directly affiliated with Kiev, but, still wearing Ukraine regalia. And they went in there and they spent something like 30 hours there. 70 of them got killed. The column of armored vehicles got taken out and it was over. But for the West's point of view, for the cameras and the media and the social media, it got, and I laughed so hard, the Belgorod People's Republic trending on Twitter for about 3 hours, which is such a joke, such a, throwing in the face of the Donbass People's Republic, this silly notion. Do you think they believe that this is, well, the people in charge didn't believe this is the liberation of Russia from Putin, but do you think that these followers really believe was this the counteroffensive? Because the senior advisor Podolyak just said that the counteroffensive began 2 days ago. Is this what Ukraine can do now? Send a couple of hundred nationalists across the border, do terrorism?
Yeah, some counteroffensive, huh? 70 of 100 got eliminated together with a column of armor. They've made several attempts in Belgorod, and each of them has been rebuffed. The West can call it a counteroffensive if they want, but from where we're sitting and, from Russia's perspective, this is not much of a counteroffensive. I will mention this, however, two things. One, it's just impossible to believe anything that comes from Ukraine, from the United States or Great Britain. You just cannot believe it. I will say this, however. I do believe, because of several attempts here in Crimea using drones, they blew up an oil storage tank. They made an attempt and they blew up a railroad track. These did not come from Ukraine, nor did the attempt, quote unquote, on the Kremlin and the life of President Putin come from Ukraine. So one can only conclude one of two things. One, these are sleeper cells who remain since 2014, people who are dissatisfied with Crimea returning to Russia, or two, the Ukrainian security services, the SBU, infiltrating, and it's very easy for them to come across the border. It's not that difficult, and are recruiting these dissidents and helping them, arming them, showing me how to make these improvised explosive devices whatsoever, and how to use these homemade drones to stage attacks on Crimea. The purpose of that is simply to instill fear in the people. I can tell you, I've been to Simferopol recently. I've been to Sevastopol just last week. I've been to the border with Ukraine near Jangoy. And I can tell you, people are not living in fear. They are not afraid to go out in the street any time of the day or night. I'm telling you, it is completely calm here in terms of the reaction of the people. Life goes on as normal.
I'm very glad to hear that. Maybe someone else wants to jump in because you had to, but I just wanted to bring up, because you mentioned Simferopol, the capital of Crimea. I watched this beautiful video of a young girl reunited with a Russian soldier, and they have this statue together. She gave this flower to a Russian soldier in 2014, and now she's a grown lady and got this huge bouquet of flowers from the soldier back. And there was this ceremony. I was wondering if you were there or you've seen this event at all.
No, I wasn't there. I wasn't there.
No,
That's
okay,
a
but
great story.
you know of the statue, right? The little girl who's sending the flower to.
Yeah. Amazing.
Billy Bob.
Well, Regis, thank you for that, analysis. A really great update on, from the ground there. I guess the big question is, what comes next? And I mean, it's all just speculation because, nobody knows what's going to happen. It doesn't, things don't look good from the perspective of the West and Ukraine. In my opinion, it's basically a stalemate. I mean, Ukraine is not going to be able to, they just don't have the capacity to reconquer any of the Donbass area or Crimea. So I don't know. It's
I can add to that because we can speculate in an informed fashion. And I'm glad that Regis included Great Britain on that list of belligerents, basically threatening states, because Boris Johnson was just sent to Texas on a Ukraine NGO's money to lobby the Republicans to gather more support for Ukraine, which is waning in the US, which is very interesting because the Western headlines have went in a direction that they blame three things, or subtly blame three things on Ukraine recently. One was the attack on the Kremlin, the Russian flag on the top of the Kremlin that failed. I don't think it was really an attack on Putin that you mentioned. The Nord Stream pipeline investigations, everybody knows who did that, but they are saying that we have these links in Poland that have roots in Ukraine, throwing Ukraine under the bus again. And this recent Belgorod incursion, the bobblehead guy, who is it? Kirby said that we warned them. We warned Ukraine not to use our weapons on Russian territory. So increasingly, there is at least a segment in Washington who say enough is enough. And the more recent headlines all include them wishing to freeze the conflict, a Korean scenario, like having a West and an East Ukraine separated by a DMZ. But terrorism that you mentioned, these sorts of partisan type terrorist attacks with IEDs, that would not stop that. And I don't think Russia would allow any such scenario. And the latest was Dmitry Peskov, when asked about freezing the conflict, he said it's not in Russia's interest. So as mad as the Baltics, Poland and Britain may be, I think the US has come to a realization that they sent these wonder weapons. First it was St. Javelin, then the HIMARS, then the Patriot, which got smashed. And now all the talk is about F-16s, but they don't want to send theirs. They're happy for Europe to send some F-16s. I think they know what fate awaits them. But I think there's a realization, especially in US circles, that, this is not what we thought it was. Russia is not what we thought it was. That's at least my informed speculation. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. You're absolutely right. And support is waning in the United States. I'm not living there now, so I really can't comment on that. But from what I've read,
They are.
it's decreasing. Biden's support is plummeting. But what I do want to mention in response to Billy Bob, I do not think anymore, I never did, that this was a stalemate in Ukraine. What this is, and it's what Prigozhin has called Bakhmut, but this is what Russia's been doing now in this second or third phase of the special military operation. It's a meat grinder. Two things. Russia lost a lot of people, several thousand, maybe 20 or 30,000 men the first time around at the beginning of the special military operation. They didn't anticipate how ferocious the response from NATO and the United States would be. Second of all, Russia has deliberately, repeatedly avoided civilian casualties in any of its offensive attacks, its shellings, or its precision-guided missile attacks. They have avoided these two things as much as they possibly can, taking ground and territory incrementally, slowly, but incrementally. I don't call that a stalemate, and especially now with Bakhmut falling. This is a major victory and development in this war. And, you know, President Putin, by the way, there was that row between Shoigu and Prigozhin and General Gerasimov. And, you know, everybody was wondering over here, oh, my God, there's corruption within the ranks. There's people that are treasonous. Everybody was wondering how Putin was going to handle it. Well, when it finally fell, Putin congratulated both Prigozhin and the Wagner Group and the Russian forces who supported and took part in the fall of this major city. So I see no panic from the Kremlin. I see no panic from my friends who live in Moscow and St. Petersburg and American friends who have just come from Crimea. There were three groups, actually. They visited Crimea, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and they report the same thing. Total calm, no evidence of there being a war right next door. And what this means to me is Russia is being very patient. Russia, nobody knows what is in the mind of Putin, or much less the Russian military command. And so I think it's best, is what I've tried to do, is to step back and just watch what's happening on a daily basis, as Ben just mentioned. This is a slow process for Russia. They could have come in, guns firing away, you know, with everything they had, but they do not want to destroy and kill any more civilians or soldiers in Ukraine, and they certainly do not want to destroy any more infrastructure or cities. And this is why I believe that Russia is just being very patient. They know what they're going to do. They know what they're up against. And I think they know that they are winning this war against the United States and its puppets in Europe. When you look at the consequences of what's happening in Europe, they have suffered tremendously from the sanctions and from this war. It was just reported today, I read that Germany is in a recession. The UK is suffering so badly that, I mean, they're not even calling it a recession. They probably should call it a depression. They're closing down all their pubs. Corporations are closing. People are without jobs. They can't get health care. And the same thing is happening all across Europe. On top of that, immigration is out of control from Sweden and Finland all the way to Italy and the UK. this is a disastrous defeat for the United States and for NATO and the European Union. I think that NATO and the European Union might be close to being finished.
I can comment on that and concur with that. There's a lot of cracks showing both in the EU and NATO now, and a lot of panic views, including my own Hungary. So I can concur. Yeah, the English can't get eggs. But before, maybe the second part of the show could be because Russia is not alone, as it is projected in the media here. But going back to your point of Russia tiptoeing into Ukraine and not wanting to kill civilians and destroy wide swaths of infrastructure, I just watched and recently posted on Twitter a series of interviews done with frontline Russian soldiers and what they think of Ukrainians. And they still say, we are a brotherly people. I don't want to kill them. We have an issue with the nationalists. We want to rescue these people from basically the Nazis. All of them. There's 5 interviews in a row. And these NATO people, I hope you don't know Paul Massaro. He's this propagandist NATO fellow. Glad that you don't. Every time anyone interacts with him, he said, they bomb schools, they bomb nurseries. Yeah, because that's where you idiots have been hiding for a year. Exactly. It really is that simple. And then Yevgeny Prigozhin came in. And just recently we heard, this is not the SBU, but the Defense Intelligence, the GUR, the head of that organization in Ukraine said the top of the kill list is Vladimir Putin, but Prigozhin is also a prominent member on it. So basically what they're left with is little terrorist incursions, blowing up IEDs with people like Daria Dugina and I forgot the name of the guy who was in a cafe in St. Petersburg. I'm sorry. But yeah, these kinds of little horrible things and nothing else. So I completely agree. It's basically over. Because of the huge escalatory dominance that Russia proposes. I mean, have you seen an F-16 go up against the S-300 or the 400 integrated system? It will be interesting. So I just want to get back to the second half. We definitely want to talk about the economics. So,
yeah, and those F-16s, they'll be detected as soon as they take off from Poland or from wherever else they're going to take off. And the Russian Su, whatever they are, 25 Su-30s, can shoot them down from 100 miles away. They won't even know they're in a battle, and they'll be completely destroyed. They're so old and not up to the challenge. This is just a PR stunt. It's part of that fake news. They're trying to make people believe, oh, this is going to be a game changer. And Biden in the United States, look what I'm doing. I'm going to train these guys in Arizona, and we're going to send them F-16s, and our allies are going to send them F-16s. This is all smoke and mirrors.
It seems like the entire Ukrainian war has been an opportunity for Western military-industrial complex to get rid of its old equipment, and just provide a way to sell new stuff to all these countries. So yeah, everybody give your stuff to Ukraine, your old stuff, and then come to us and we'll sell you the new good stuff. It's cynical. It's a cynical exploitation of all the people that are dying. Regis, what about the Prigozhin spat? You touched on it a little bit with Putin, and not really with Putin, but definitely with Shoigu and the chiefs of staff. So he had this interview. It was several hours, and he was very what's the word? He was very harsh towards the leadership in Russia, the ruling class in Russia. And he was saying that, the wealthy elites, their children need to go to the front. Their children need to start fighting. And if that doesn't happen, you could have, and again, this is hyperbole, but he did use the word revolution. I mean, apparently the Russian equivalent of revolution. He said, you could have a revolution from the working class, kind of, if the elites don't start sacrificing the way that the working class is sacrificing. So what are your thoughts on that? That's that's a criticism. I would point out that Putin is very popular. The way he's handling it is very popular. He's got a great approval rating. But still, what would you say to Prigozhin in response to his? Yeah.
Well, here's the reaction that has been public. That rant with so many expletives went viral here in Russia as well. Everybody was talking about it. Many, many people agreed with him. In fact, there are many people here, and I'm talking about friends that I have in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and here, agreed with him that there's corruption and treason within the ranks of the Russian military. They also agreed with him that the elite, maybe some who are surrounding Putin, there's an intellectual elite, there's the oligarchy that are, and all of these are Western-leaning, liberal, who he called out. They're in it for the money. They want this war to end because many of them are losing money. And so people here in Russia know that there's corruption at the highest levels. And they know that Putin has done his best, but nobody can cut out what's been going on for decades and decades, and maybe longer than that. And so what about this spat? It's obviously over. Prigozhin's troops were going to leave Bakhmut, Artyomovsk today, hand it over to the Russians. There are already Russian police forces there. And what they're basically doing now is cleaning up. And over the next few days or weeks, they'll be demining this relatively large city. So I think it's over. I think Putin handled it very well, calmly, as he always does. He's not a reactionary. And, I think that it's over with. Whether it'll bring about some change in terms of him exposing maybe some, if not treasonous elements that are seeding dissension and discord in the military and amongst the elite, that might get cleaned up. It maybe will subdue.
Well, he did call. Prigozhin did call for the resignation of Shoigu and Gerasimov just 2 days ago. What do you think Prigozhin is? I feel like he's angling for something, and he would make a great number 2 for Medvedev. And as you just put it, Regis, there are a large number of people within Russia who feel that it's not that the war is happening. It's that Russia is not throwing itself into the war enough. That Putin's being too careful. Could this be a political maneuver on Prigozhin's part, or is there more substance to it?
Well, actually, there have been reports here in Russia that Prigozhin has political aspirations. There are others that are insisting he's on a total ego trip. He's a legend in his own times, and he's bigger than what he's projecting. So, I mean, who knows? I guess we're going to have to wait and see, like everything else, how it all shakes out.
It's speculation, and I can't comment on the corruption. We have a minute to break, I know. I'd just like to add that Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson's son, is in the front line. So that's something in that point of the elite should send. And the Shoigu, where's my fucking shells? Everybody's seen that. It's wonderful. But I said at the time, and I feel vindicated now that they're getting medals and awards, that this is show meant to bring more AFU into the meat grinder. And that's it, because this SMO didn't really have a face. All of the Russian and the Wagner people have their faces covered. So there had to be someone on the television screens doing this stuff. So for me, I feel indicated that was practically a psyop meant at the armed forces of Ukraine. But again, this is speculation until we see and learn more. But the most recent comment was there are 10,000 people wanting to join Wagner every month. That's
that was interesting.
Prigozhin, but I don't have a hard time believing it, because I've seen celebrations with that flag, with the Wagner organizations, banners and everything all over Russia, and not just Russia. At least more recent one I've seen was in Australia. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Mm-hmm.
I want to reiterate just quickly before break that I think it's the totally correct approach by Putin that people in Crimea and people in Russia are living their lives normally, and they're not really even aware. I mean, of course they're aware, but it doesn't affect their lives. And I think that is the exact correct approach right now, because it's just at the very beginning, possibly. And so it would be wrong. So, Prigozhin is advocating, hey, we need to mobilize. We need to get on a war footing. And I don't think we're there yet. I think Putin is right to maintain, the structure that he has now, and to not, go overboard, not do mass mobilizations, not, go on a whole total war footing. That would play right into the West's hands. That's just my opinion.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And maybe we can go to a break. Yeah.
Yeah, break time. MUTIU, take it away. Maybe not. Well,
we got the last one just perfectly.
In the interim, let me just say something about the U.S. electorate here. Routinely, they have polls where the media, the mass media, corporate media, figures in near single digits, 9%, 11% trusted. Yet, when it comes to the war in Ukraine, there's a high 60% for support of the war in Ukraine. So you have an obvious disconnect between the American public, because they're, as I've stressed many times on this show, they're ignorant ninnies. And being ignorant ninnies, fortunately or unfortunately for us, the elites ignore. They don't give a rat's rectum what the general population thinks. They're going to do what they're going to do. And so this is living here. It's like de Tocqueville said, this is the farthest thing from a genuine democracy that I've ever seen. And that was 1826, and nothing has changed. I just wanted to point out that enormous disconnect. And people.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you.
And we're back. And that was my commentary on the American public. And you can see I have a very high opinion. Where do you want to go next?
I want to second the piggyback on that, the public approval thing, because the latest I got from Levada, which is not very close to the Kremlin, it's a very independent source, which was the April figure. Vladimir Putin enjoys 83% approval rating. Yeah. Just imagine any leader in Europe, in America, just enjoying that. And, we had the G7, the C7, the collapsing 7 meeting in Hiroshima exactly a week ago. And New York Times came up with this fantastic title saying the meeting of the unloved leaders or something like that. And I'm just going to list to you quickly because it was so funny to me when someone pointed out that the approval rating of the leaders there is Biden is the highest with 42%, right. Trudeau 39%, Olaf Scholz, the hostage in Germany 34%, Sunak, the Indian Blair, is 33%. Kishida in Japan, the host, 31%. And Macron is the most pathetic with 25%. That's the world. That's the G7, the old empire's heart, and basically the new world. And that's where we can transition, I think, to the wider geopolitics of this thing, because I have an important, let's say an observation, because I recently rewatched Vladimir Putin's speech, 2007 at the Munich Security Conference, when many of the people in the world first saw what this person is, what Vladimir Putin is. And let's remember the history here. 2008, the big financial crash happened. 2009, the BRICS countries are basically formed, announced, and 3 years later it is unveiled that China is building the Belt and Road Initiative. Well, unveiled in China means it's been in the planning phases for many years. They've been working out kinks and all that. But basically, 2008, if you look at something called the A1, C1, I lost it, but the money supply in the US, they started printing money 2008, went way, way up, and 2020 even more. It's just a financial collapse waiting to happen, and the answer was already at least 10 to 15 years in the making. It's not a alliance they have to build now. It's already there. The isolated Russia, the isolated China is just babble. And the other one from Macron, Regis, I'd love to have your comment on it, that Russia has completely become the vassal of China. I wonder how Russian people or the people of Crimea feel about such comments.
Well, I'll address this last point, Ben. There is concern among some Russians that they don't trust China. I don't share that, but there are some. I have also read reports and comments that in this march towards the New World Order, a multipolar world, that Russia is just a sidecar to China. I don't agree with that. In fact, I think that in terms of who is leading this very rapid march towards the New World Order, a multipolar world, it has been one Vladimir Putin. It has not been President Xi. President Xi, I think, he's more concerned with the economy and business.
Yes.
It's obvious why I think he's showing so much restraint with the threats of the United States against him over Taiwan. President Putin, he's been doing just as much groundwork as China has in Africa, in the Middle East, in South America, the Southern Hemisphere, all over the former Soviet republics. Putin has been there, or Lavrov has been there. And I think that Russia is not concerned about business so much as China is. Russia primarily is concerned with survival and sustainability. With this vast area of land, with the vast resources that they have, with everything from gold, uranium, silver, water, timber, unparalleled anywhere else in the world.
Energy and agriculture as well.
And agriculture. And Russia now is almost completely self-sufficient, sustainable. What Russia is looking to do is to build trade and business, not only with China, but with India, with Iran, with the Saudis, with South America, with Cuba, and with all of Africa. And they are not so much driven by this economic engine that China is. That's not to say that they don't need it or they don't want it, but it's not I think, their primary concern. And I am very proud, actually, of what the role that President Putin has played. Well, since the 2007 Munich Security Conference, Ben, that you mentioned, when on that day with that speech with John McCain and Joe Lieberman sitting in the front row scowling at him when he called out the United States painted a target on his back. And since that day, he has become the United States public enemy #1. They compare him to Hitler on steroids. And that just shows you how desperate I think the United States is. And it shows you not only how confident President Putin and the Russians are, but it shows you that Putin is the primary leader on the global scale. President President Xi does not even come close to the leadership character and qualities of President Putin on a global scene. Your thoughts?
Well,
I
I just want to toss that in, because in June we have the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, SPEEF, coming up again, and it's now known that the BRICS countries have aggregate wealth superior to the G7. It's a slight advantage, but it's going to grow as the years go. And with the St. Petersburg conference coming up, there's talk of some of the countries involved, and it involves hundreds of over 100 countries. Some of the countries involved want to create a currency that challenges the dollar, a world currency, a base currency, and so I'd like to hear some
based on a basket of goods, real raw materials, which is wonderful. So I'd like to respectfully disagree with Regis while mostly agreeing. And basically, what I see is, yes, Putin is engaged in real diplomacy. So is Lavrov, and he just recently mentioned in his speech that it should be based on international law, respect, and mutual trust. So that's how he's building alliances. Economics is a part of it. Obviously, he's making deals of free trade zones. So just as examples of that, Evira Nabulina, the head of the central bank, is right now in Tehran making agreements on national currencies. And what has begun in Moscow right now is the Eurasian Economic Union summit, basically, where they're doing the same thing. It's basically de-dollarization all around. So they are doing economics as well as friendship and historic friendships, especially in Africa, where we've seen some American leaders, amazing interviews on, we will side with Putin. We will even send troops. I think this was South African. And I don't have it. It was fantastic, but yes. But China is also, so China mostly brokered the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which was fantastic. The Turkish-Syrian rapprochement, that was Russian making. So I think most of this talk of calling them vassals, junior or senior partners, is a last-ditch effort by the West to try to separate them, who are not really separable, because there's also another summit in Xi'an, which was the Central Asian nations meeting with Xi Jinping, and he said the core should be resist color revolutions, resist foreign interference at home. I see these countries which are in this, how do you call it, where they complement each other perfectly, as in a very equal, very respectful relationships. That's my only gripe. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. Europe can't think of any way because it's captured most of it, except for Orban and maybe Serbia, who is, oh, by the way, the other news out of this Eurasian Economic Union is free trade zones with, let's see, Iran, Egypt, there's another Middle Eastern country, and Serbia. So it looks like they could get a bone, perhaps by not sanctioning Russia for all this time. Unfortunately, we did, and all we get is oil through the Druzhba pipeline, and the transit fees are going to rise again from the 1st of June. That's what Hungary gets.
And in Southeast Asia, every country from Malaysia all the way through Vietnam want to become members of BRICS.
30 countries.
It's a Vietnam that has a long history of animosity with China. You got Thailand that has a new government, which is not going to look as kindly toward China as in the past, but still, they all want to be in BRICS. Leading the way is Laos, and it's just heartwarming to see that.
You know,
Laos, which is still demining. I'm sorry, but
yes,
most of the American bonds.
Train of jars, absolutely.
Yeah,
horrendous bombing. Yeah,
so
more ordnance dropped on Laos by the U.S. Than and all the ordnance dropped on Europe.
And they didn't even acknowledge it when they were doing it. It was a big secret.
Yeah.
And illegal, of course, illegal. Go ahead.
And there's an article in Covert Action that confirms, and I just read Doug Valentine's book about all the heroin that was run through the Golden Triangle in Vang Pao and into Laos, and they used in Vientiane they used a Pepsi Cola bottling plant to process the heroin and give it to American troops.
Yeah.
So suck on that, America.
Yeah, we've thrown a lot at Regis. Let's let him respond.
I'm sorry.
Well, I haven't had a chance to address Regis, but go ahead, Regis. Go ahead. That's a lot.
No, I wanted to piggyback on something Ben said about China and Russia. That I do believe that they see each other as equals. In fact, I mentioned that there's a lot of Russians that fear China, that China is looking to be the next hegemon. Anybody who's studied Chinese history knows that China, while it has conducted trade all over the world, has never colonized a single country or region, ever. China has never had imperial pursuits. It's always been about trade and culture. That's China's history in terms of its dealings with other parts of the world. China is looking to do the same thing again with the new Silk Road. And I believe that Russia should have no fear of China wanting to become the hegemon. And I don't think Putin is concerned about that either. So I do agree, Ben, that they are not competitors. One is not the sidecar of the other. I believe that together, they are compatible. They complement each other. Billy Bob, your turn.
Go Billy Bob.
I agree with that completely, Regis. I mean, they have a shared vision of how to improve the system, how to improve the current system that's dominated by the rules-based Western order. So it's it's multilateralism, it's multipolarism, and it's not based on Western dictates and where they make the rules for other people, but they don't abide by them themselves. So they have this shared understanding of how things should be improved and how things can be improved. And so they're working together to make that vision a reality. And if Russia sides with the West, China's done. If China sides with the West, Russia's done. So they know that. They understand that in order to see this future that is in the best interest of humanity, they have to work together. And so I think I bristle at the idea of picking a side between Russia and China, saying, "Oh, I prefer Russia to China, and I prefer China to Russia." I mean, that's kind of a Western look at things that can be problematic, and we want to discourage people from people in Russia from fearing China and not liking China, and we want to discourage people in China from dismissing Russia and say, "Oh, we're really number one, you're just a sidecar." Like that kind of paradigm isn't helpful, and people need to understand the reality of the situation, that only together can we come up against this imperial system that has caused so much trouble for the last 7,500 years. What else?
No, as they said, they are building a fairer world order, and I believe that is what we're seeing in the making, at least for 10 or 15 years. But this war, this special military operation, it was really the catalyst. It was something that broke out, and the West has no answer. We're going to further sanctions. Iran's getting its 7th package. Russia's getting its 11th package.
China has really helped out Russia's economy a lot. They've increased exports by like a factor of, they've doubled exports into Russia since the SMO began, I believe. So they've really done a lot to support Russia, while at the same time not deliberately antagonizing the West and opening themselves up to escalatory sanctions, etc. So, but there's a lot of Russians, right, that are upset. Well, I want to see China sacrifice too. We're sacrificing in Ukraine. We're dying. I want China to start sacrificing. I want China to step out and take some steps that are going to open themselves up to retaliatory things from the West. But again, just like Putin's approach, where people in Crimea, people in Russia don't really feel, this conflict. I think that's the right approach, and I think it's correct of China to stabilize the Russian economy. Help them out as much as they can, give them all the support they need without escalating things and causing the West to have reason to do even more than it's already doing. And I don't know. It's not easy, and it takes real leadership, the kind that the West doesn't have. But I think both Putin and Xi are tremendous leaders, and it kind of bristles a little bit, saying, "Oh, this one's better than this one, or this one's better than this one." But I understand that's people's opinions. I think they're both tremendous.
One thing that I think is really important to mention in the context of what we're talking about, the threats from the United States on China, sanctions, embargoes, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier and its whole contingent of ships surrounding China. People are talking about these are two nuclear-armed countries. And people in the United States have been gaslighting the world, Victoria Nuland, Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, about the possibility of a nuclear escalation. Russia, on the other hand, has done the same. Dmitry Medvedev, he has become a hawk, where he was Western-leaning, a liberal, now is saying Russia will respond with everything in its arsenal if the Russian territory is attacked or the Russia's future is being threatened. This is not good. And I don't know how much time we have left, but I'd like to have your guys' thoughts on this. The United States is the only country in the world that used an atomic bomb on a country, Japan, which was already defeated. They dropped that bomb as a message to the Soviet Union and Stalin of who was in charge. Now, we've lived through 75 years of this. My question is, Blinken, Winken, and Nod, as they're sometimes referred to, but Blinken, Sullivan, Nuland, Miley, and Austin, and even Joe Biden are not the people who ordered the bombing of Japan in 1945 in August, but are the same people still behind this neoliberal, this attempt of the United States to dominate. Are they crazy enough to risk nuclear Armageddon, recognizing that they've lost this epic battle for control of the future order of the world? Are they crazy enough to end it all? I'd like your thoughts on this before we conclude.
Nuclear Armageddon. Who wants to go first?
I don't think they're crazy enough to do that. I don't think that's in their interest. I think they are crazy because they've increased the chance already. I mean, they've already pushed the envelope way more than is necessary. And not in the interest of American people, it's in the interest of the wealthy ruling Western establishment that is seeing its share of wealth, power, and privilege decline. So that's why they're pushing this farther to, the risk of nuclear Armageddon. But no, they're not suicidal. They're having a temper tantrum. They can't stand the fact that they're being displaced, but they're going to be displaced. And I'm not worried about nuclear Armageddon, honestly, but I know that there's a risk of it, and the risk of it and the fact that we're getting closer to that possibility is 100% their fault. And they're not doing it to further our interest. It's their own interest. But I'll stop.
I
Carlo?
agree. I agree with Billy Bob on that. The historical, there's a great difference between now and the historical use of the U.S. bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, they had invested $2 billion in the project. Leslie Groves, who ran the military end of the project, along with physicists like Edward Teller, they were very much for bombing. You had a core member. Look what they did to Oppenheimer. They stripped him of his security clearances. He ended up going to Truman after Truman had retired and updating him on Harry Truman, who knew nothing about anything else. He was led around on a leash by Jimmy Burns, who was also very much for dropping the bomb. Oppenheimer's comment was, "I've been trying to to this guy for a couple of years now, and he's too stupid to even understand what radiation is." So it's like, and Truman was the everyman. He was like the American everyman, and so what Regis said is exactly right. The Russians were massing on the west, on the east of their country, which is the west of Japan. Curtis LeMay had basically decimated Tokyo with the fire bombings of Tokyo. He's the guy that said about Vietnam, let's drive him back into the Stone Age, and some congressman answered, well, General, I think they're already there. And it's like, so the situation was, it was gratuitous. The dropping of the bomb is now, with documentation, been gratuitous. It came up when Paul Fussell wrote this book called "Thank God for the Bomb." I was in the Philippines at the time, and I was one of the Americans that was going to have to go to the mainland of China. Already, the information was basically available that wasn't true, and now the documentation is there that the reason they dropped the bomb was to intimidate the Soviet Union. Number one. Number two was they spent $2 billion, so they had, at least according to Leslie Groves and those people, they had something to prove, and Lilienthal and all that scum, and that they had something to prove to the American people, the taxpayers. This is what we got, and also prove something to the rest of the world. That's my take on it.
Good take. And I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish, but I pretty much agree with all the previous speakers that but there is always a risk, because B-52s go over the Black Sea and into the territory of the Baltics, and those are provocations. But we are lucky that Putin is in charge, because he's always responsibly handling these provocative events, turning them back, guiding them out, go away. That's why we're not, scavenging ruins in irradiated landscape right now, because he's not like the West, thank goodness. But while there's a risk, Europe and the US, the collective West, wouldn't be doing this stupid, I can't call it anything else but theatrical approach. Like Maya Sandu, the little Moldovan president, said that if Putin arrives in Moldova, he will be arrested, according to the ICC thing. Like, why would you resort to stupid shit like this if there was a chance to win on the ground? There clearly isn't. And don't forget, Belarus is now also a nuclear superpower as of yesterday. So they obviously have an answer for this NATO provocation, because 3 NATO countries have it. So while not worried, I know there's always a risk. I don't know if Regis is happy with our answers, but I wanted to give him the last 2 minutes if he wants to reflect.
Well, no, I hope that it won't happen either. I hope there's the crazed Dr. Strangelove in some basement in Washington, D.C. But the risk, Ben, as you've mentioned, we've avoided the catastrophe more than once in the last 75 years. But now, because of the close proximity of NATO forces, United States forces, B-52s circling Russia, they're nuclear armed, the chance of a misjudgment, somebody misreads something on a radar screen, there's some close contact or even contact of Russian fighter jets and NATO fighter jets that are buzzing around this whole area, we are closer to an accident than we've ever been before. And that's my real concern, that it will happen by accident and it'll be an escalation that'll be out of control.
A fine way to end it. Thank you.
And there's been dozens of incidences of that. And one in particular, a Russian, submarine commander.
Vasily Aklipov was his name.
Right, that's right.
He saved the world.
Saved the world. That's a good note to end on.
It is. Thank you, everybody, for hanging around for this episode. See you next week.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And
do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you.
Oh, Regis is gone. Regis is gone.